The morning of my wedding, I was sitting on the cold tile floor of a hotel bathroom in my bridal gown, and I was not crying because I was nervous. I was not crying because I had cold feet. I was crying because somewhere on the other side of that bathroom door, the man I loved more than anything in this world was being told the one thing I had spent 7 years trying to leave behind. And the person who told him was not my enemy. She was the woman who had been my best friend since we were 19 years old. She did not mean to destroy me. She was drunk, she was laughing, she thought she was defending me. But by the time the sun came up that morning, my wedding was canceled, my dress was still on, and the hotel suite that was supposed to be the beginning of my forever had become the most silent, devastating room I had ever sat inside. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you, and do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of the night before I was supposed to become Sarah Mitchell. The night a secret I buried in another country, in another version of my life, came back and stood in the middle of my wedding suite like it owned the room. I want you to understand something before we go any further. The woman you are about to hear about, the girl in Dubai, the girl who made choices no woman should ever have to make just to survive, that woman was not who I became. But she was who I was when I had nothing, when I was alone in a foreign country with no passport, no money, and no one coming to save me. And if you have ever been in a place where survival was the only option left, then you already understand more than most people will. Let me take you back to the beginning because this story does not start in a hotel suite in New York. It starts in a small apartment in Brooklyn in the winter of 2009 when I was 22 years old, broke, and believing every single word my best friend Vanessa told me. Vanessa Carter had been in my life since our freshman year at community college. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made it feel like a party had just started. She was loud in the best way, generous, funny, and she had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she was talking to you. We had been through everything together. The bad boyfriends, the lost jobs, the months when we pooled our last dollars to make rent. She was not just my friend. She was my family. So when Vanessa came to me in December of 2009 with a proposition that she said would change both of our lives, I listened. I listened the way you listen to someone you have trusted completely for 3 years. She told me she had a contact overseas. A woman who ran a business in Dubai, hospitality, she said. Event coordination, hosting, client entertainment for high net worth individuals. She said the pay was extraordinary, that girls like us, young and presentable and smart, could make in 3 months what would take us 3 years to save in Brooklyn. She said she had already been offered the position, and she did not want to go alone. She wanted me to come with her. She made it sound like an adventure. She made it sound like the door we had both been waiting for had finally opened. I want to be completely honest with you, because this story only works if I am honest. I had questions. There was a part of me that felt something was not quite right about the offer. The details were vague. The contact was someone Vanessa had only spoken to online. The salary seemed too high for work that was never described specifically enough. But I was 22. I was tired of being broke. And I trusted Vanessa with my life. So I said yes. We bought our tickets in January of 2010, and we flew to Dubai. When we landed and made contact with the woman coordinating the arrangement, she took our passports immediately. That was the first moment the ground shifted under my feet. I told myself it was procedure, that it was a visa requirement, that it was temporary. But the feeling in my stomach told a different story. We were taken to an apartment in a neighborhood I did not know, and when we walked in, there were other women already there. Young women, quiet, eyes that had already learned not to ask too many questions. And within 24 hours, the woman who had brought us there told us plainly what the work actually was. We had been lured with promises of legitimate work and instead found ourselves in a situation of debt bondage, told that we owed money for our flights and accommodation, and that the only way to repay it was through sex work. I remember standing in that apartment and feeling the floor disappear beneath me. I remember looking at Vanessa and seeing on her face an expression I had never seen before. Not guilt exactly, but something close to it. Something that told me she had known more than she admitted. We never spoke about that moment directly. Not then. Not for years. Because in that apartment in Dubai, survival became the only language either of us spoke. I will not walk you through every detail of those months, because some things belong to the person who lived them and not to an audience. What I will tell you is this: there was no break, there was no way to escape, and the trauma of those months never fully leaves you. What I will also tell you is that I was not passive. I was not broken. Every single day I was in that apartment, I was calculating. I was saving. I was planning. Because the only thing that kept me moving was the knowledge that if I stayed disciplined and quiet and smart, I would eventually have enough to get myself out. And after 4 months, I did. I bought a ticket home. I walked out. And I never looked back. I came back to New York in the spring of 2010, and I told no one. Not my mother. Not my cousins. Not a single soul outside of Vanessa, who had left Dubai 2 months before me through means she never fully explained. I buried it. I built a wall around it so thick and so high that after a few years, it almost felt like it had happened to someone else. I went back to school. I got a degree in healthcare administration. I got a job at a hospital on the Upper West Side. I built a life that was clean and purposeful and mine. And I told myself that what happened in Dubai was the price I paid for trusting the wrong person at the wrong moment, and that it did not define who I was or who I was becoming. And then I met Daniel. Daniel Mitchell came into my life in the summer of 2015 at the kind of unremarkable setting that makes the best love stories: a grocery store on a Saturday morning, 2 people reaching for the same brand of coffee at the exact same second. He was the kind of man who apologized even when he was not wrong, who remembered the small things you mentioned once in passing, who made you feel completely safe just by being in the same room. We dated for 8 months before he told me he loved me. We were together for 2 years before he proposed. And in all of that time, in all of those conversations, in all of the late nights and the vulnerable moments and the honest exchanges, I never told him about Dubai. Not because I did not trust him, but because I had convinced myself it was a closed chapter, and that opening it would only hurt something that was already whole. I know now that I was wrong about that, but I am getting ahead of myself. Daniel proposed in the spring of 2017 on a rooftop in Manhattan with the skyline behind him and a ring that was simple and perfect and exactly what I would have chosen for myself. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We set the date for April of 2018. And in those months of planning, of venue deposits and dress fittings and seating charts, I was the happiest I had ever been in my adult life. I had a career I was proud of, a man who loved me the way I had always hoped to be loved, and a future that felt stable and real and earned. Everything I had survived felt worth it in those moments. Daniel had one sibling, a younger sister named Rachel. Rachel Mitchell was 28, sharp, protective of her brother in the way that only sisters can be, and from the very beginning she watched me with the kind of careful attention that made me both respect her and feel slightly unsteady in her presence. She was not unkind to me. She was not hostile. But she had a way of looking at you that made you feel like she was always doing the math, always running a quiet calculation in the background. I liked her. I wanted her to like me back. And by the time the wedding was approaching, I thought we had found a genuine warmth between us. I thought we were becoming family. It was my maid of honor, a woman named Denise, who suggested that we invite Rachel to the pre-wedding hotel night. It was meant as a gesture of inclusion, a signal that I did not see Daniel's family as separate from my own. The plan was simple. The night before the wedding, 6 of us would check into a suite at the hotel where the ceremony was being held the following afternoon. Me, Denise, Vanessa, 2 other close friends, Keisha and Monica, and Rachel. We would order room service, cut a small cake, drink champagne, celebrate. A quiet, intimate send-off to my single life. That was all it was supposed to be. What I did not account for was how drunk we would all get. And more specifically, what Vanessa was like when she was drunk. We arrived at the hotel suite at 7 in the evening. The room was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below us, a cake that Denise had ordered with our names piped in gold. We opened the first bottle of champagne before we even put down our bags. By 9 o'clock, we had gone through 3 bottles, and the room was full of laughter and music and the kind of chaotic joy that only happens when a group of women who love each other are in the same small space together. I remember feeling so full in that moment. So completely full. At some point after 10, the conversation shifted the way conversations do when the champagne has been flowing for hours. Someone, I think it was Keisha, said it in a joking way, looking at Rachel, that half-teasing question that was meant to be flattering. How do we know Sarah is good enough for your brother? And Rachel laughed and said something kind. And then Vanessa, who was on her 4th glass and whose voice had gotten that particular loose, unguarded quality that I had learned over the years meant she was past the point of careful judgment, stood up from the couch.
She said she wanted to say something.
She said she wanted everyone to know who Sarah really was. She was smiling. She thought she was about to give a toast. I saw it happening in real time, and I felt my entire body go cold, but I was across the room, and the words were already coming out of her mouth before I could move or speak or do anything to stop them. She started talking about when we were younger. She started talking about how she had once called me to come to Dubai with her, and how I had gone, and how when I arrived and realized what the work actually involved, I had been trapped there with no money, no passport, and no way home. She said she had always carried guilt about that. She said she wanted everyone to know that what I had done to survive in that situation was not a reflection of who I was, but of how desperate the circumstances were. She was crying by the time she finished. She thought she was defending me. The room was completely silent. I looked at Rachel, and I watched every single degree of warmth that had developed between us over the past 2 years drain out of her face in a matter of seconds. She was not angry. She was not loud. She was still. And that stillness was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen in another human being. Because I knew what it meant. I knew that behind that stillness, something had already been decided. She picked up her phone quietly. She stepped out of the suite. And I sat in the middle of that room surrounded by women who loved me, and I have never felt more alone in my life. Daniel arrived at the hotel at 11:30 at night. He had been at his own event across town, his bachelor dinner with his closest friends, and when Rachel called him, he had left without explanation and come directly to the hotel. I met him in a hallway. He was still in his suit. He looked at me for a long time without saying anything. And then he said 3 words that I will never forget for as long as I live. He said, "I need time." And he walked to the elevator, and he left. I went back into the suite. The music had been turned off. The cake was still on the table, half-eaten. Vanessa was sitting on the edge of the bed with her head in her hands, and when she looked up at me, her face was a complete wreck of mascara and guilt and horror at what she had done. Keisha and Monica did not know where to look. Denise was standing by the window with her arms wrapped around herself. And Rachel was gone. I did not sleep that night. I sat in a chair by the window, and I watched the city below me, and I thought about all the years I had spent trying to become someone new. All the degrees, all the work, all the discipline, all the carefully constructed distance between who I was in that Dubai apartment and who I had become. And I thought, was it ever real? Or had I just been borrowing time? The wedding coordinator called at 7 in the morning. Daniel had already contacted the venue. The ceremony was canceled. Guests would be notified. I did not argue. I did not make phone calls or send messages or try to explain myself to anyone. I took off my engagement ring and I placed it on the hotel nightstand. And then I called a car and I went home. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my adult life. I went to work. I came home. I did not reach out to Daniel. I had made a decision in that hotel room that I would not beg, that I would not try to force someone to accept a version of my story they were not ready to receive. But the silence between us was not empty. It was full of everything we had not said to each other. And some nights it was so heavy I could barely breathe under the weight of it. About 3 months after the canceled wedding, I heard through a mutual friend that Daniel's mother had been speaking to him. Margaret Mitchell was a woman I had always admired, quiet, measured, deeply wise in the way that comes from having lived a full life with both joy and grief in it. Apparently, she had sat her son down and asked him one question. She had asked him, "Are you walking away from the woman, or from a story someone else told you about her past?" And apparently Daniel had not had an answer for that. Another month passed. Then another. The mutual friend told me that Daniel's closest friend Marcus had been talking to him too. Marcus had apparently said something that Daniel repeated to me much later, that stayed with me long after everything else. Every person in this city is carrying something they survived. The question is not what she survived. The question is who she became. In the autumn of 2018, 7 months after the canceled wedding, Daniel called me. We did not have a long conversation. He asked if we could meet. I said yes. We sat across from each other at a coffee shop on the same block where our grocery store had been, and we talked for 4 hours. I told him everything. Not the version that Vanessa had told in a hotel suite after too much champagne, but my version. The full truth. The weight of a cold January, a flight I should never have boarded, a passport that was taken at an airport, months that I survived by going somewhere deep inside myself where no one could reach me, and the long, slow years of rebuilding that followed. I did not perform it. I did not apologize for it. I told it to him the way it happened, and then I waited. He reached across the table, and he took my hand. And he said, "I am sorry I left." I said, "I understand why you did." And we sat there for a long time without saying anything else, because sometimes the most important conversations do not end with a sentence. They end with two people deciding to stay. We set a new date. We were married in the spring of 2019, 1 year after the morning I sat on a hotel bathroom floor in a wedding dress that never made it to the ceremony. The second wedding was smaller, quieter, 20 people instead of 140. Daniel's mother was in the front row. Vanessa was there, and she and I had done the hard, painful, necessary work of repairing what had been broken between us, not quickly, not easily, but genuinely. Even Rachel came. She did not make a speech. She did not need to. She hugged me before the ceremony and she said, "I was wrong to make that call before I understood the full story." And I told her, "You were protecting your brother. I never blamed you for that." When Daniel and I stood in front of those 20 people and said the words we had written ourselves, I was not nervous. I was not afraid. I was the most certain I had ever been of anything in my entire life. Because we had not just survived a canceled wedding. We had survived the thing that canceled it. We had looked at the hardest version of our story and decided that it was still worth choosing. And I believe that kind of love, the kind that gets tested and comes back, is the only kind that lasts. I am telling you this story today because I want you to understand something that took me a long time to understand for myself. Survival is not a character flaw. Desperation is not a personality. The things we do when we are trapped and alone and out of options are not the full measure of who we are. What matters, what has always mattered, is what we do with the life we rebuild afterward. Whether we show up with honesty, with care, with consistency. Whether we become someone worth trusting. I spent 7 years believing that my past was a bomb that would eventually detonate and destroy everything I had built. And in one night, in a hotel suite with too much champagne and too little caution, it did. But here is what no one tells you about the detonation. Sometimes what gets destroyed needed to be destroyed. Sometimes the only way to build something that truly lasts is to let the secrets that were holding it up from underneath finally come to the surface. Daniel and I have been married for 5 years now. We have a son. His name is Marcus. And yes, that name is intentional. We live in a brownstone in Brooklyn, not far from the apartment where a 22-year-old version of me agreed to board a flight that would take me somewhere I was not prepared for. I drive past that block sometimes and I think about her. I think about how alone she was and how hard she fought to become someone better and how she had no way of knowing that the life she was fighting for would one day look like this. I do not carry Dubai as a secret anymore. I carry it as a chapter. A hard one. An expensive one. But mine. Before I leave you tonight, I want to ask you something that I think about often. If you were Daniel, if the person you were about to marry had a past like mine, a past born from desperation and survival and circumstances they did not choose, would you have come back? Or would the story have been too much? I genuinely want to know. Leave your answer in the comments, because I think how you answer that question says a great deal about what you believe love is actually for. And if you are watching this and you are carrying something from your own past, something you survived, something you are ashamed of, something you believe would end everything if it ever came to light, I want you to hear this. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are everything you became after it. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. This has been Hidden Intense Stories. If this story moved you in any way, please hit the like button. It helps more people find this channel and hear stories like this one. Subscribe so you are here when the next one drops. And I will see you in the next story.